These films now have flashed back to Saigon, I suspect. As I've mentioned before, when they were put together, despite the amount of money I paid to have it done, they weren't put together in the right order. However, you are seeing something of what Saigon looked like back in those days, and many people tell me it doesn't look much different these days, apart from a lot of new high-rise. That's the presidential palace at the time, and it still is, as far as I know, except there's be a communist czar in there now, I suppose. And they're the gates where the North Vietnamese tank crashed through in 1975 when the North finally conquered the South, 4 years after all the American, Australian and other Allied ground forces had left the country. I'm not sure what I was doing in these pictures. Back in those days, it was always unusual to see, for us from Australia, to see women working at menial tasks. I had first encountered that, of course, in Malaya back in the 1950s. More street scenes with the ubiquitous Renault taxis. And jaywalking was down to a fine art there. And I'm not sure about traffic regulations, but it all seemed to work. As you can see, Saigon looked like a very normal city at the time, and it only went into panic mode when a few rockets or mortars landed in it, and then the minute they stopped, everybody got back to normal living. Now this is flying in a Sioux helicopter out to the east of Nui Dat, whilst the battalion was on Operation Portsea. By this stage, I'd become the battalion second in command. This was the first task force operation closely coordinated with the United States ground forces. Overall coordination was exercised by our task force headquarters. Portsea was primarily a search and destroy operation in the area between Nui Dat and Xuan Moc to the east, and from Bin Jia southward to the sea. During the first phase, in late March, the battalion conducted operations south of Route 23, and in conjunction with similar operations north of Route 23 by the 11th United States Armoured Cavalry Regiment. The second phase was mainly the protection of United States and Australian engineers who were repairing and reopening Route 23 from Dat Do to Xuan Moc. Concurrently, search and destroy operations were being conducted by a brigade of the 9th US Infantry Division, generally in the Operation Ingham area and further towards the east and north. Here you can see lots and lots of US Army engineers equipment as they went in. That's Captain what's his name? Charles Mollison, Captain Charles Mollison. More photos of the areas being cleared on the way to the east. All this area had been out of bounds to the Australian Task Force until we had the assistance of the United States to go ahead and forcibly go through to Swan Mock. Flying in helicopters, it was generally best to fly very low to the ground because that gave the enemy less chance at taking pot shots at you. If you were high in the sky, they had longer to take aim. Whereas if you came at them with a rush, they didn't quite have the same chance. South China Sea. And for some reason, I went out to check out this fishing boat. Whether or not that was on my initiative or I'd been asked to, I don't know. 2 fishing boats. The Viet Cong used fishing boats to resupply their forces to the south extensively, and we're always trying to catch up with them when they landed. Selfie, a la the 1960s. And in the background, the only thing that was holding us up in the sky. I can't remember the name of this lad who was a pilot from 161 Recce flight. Back on the ground, on the road, looks like the road between Vung Tau and the task force area at Nui Dat. The quality of these movies is not good. Whether or not it was my equipment, my technique, or the dullness of the weather, I'm not sure. But I remember that the Australian Army Public Relations photographers were only taking their photographs and films in black and white at the time. This now is at an encampment somewhere, and here we are in the town of Ba Ria, which was the province capital, with some of the local Vietnamese forces guys who had a terribly hard job. Back in Nui Dat now at the officers' mess, and 2 of the young officers there, and I can't recognise who that is. That's Captain McLean Williams, Ian McLean Williams, heading back home to Australia at the end of his tour, and he was to undertake to get together a battalion book recording our tour in Vietnam. This is the battalion band practicing around battalion headquarters area. It was not often we heard the band, as they were normally employed as stretcher bearers throughout the companies. This is the band marching in front of the last patrol that the battalion carried out outside the wire. It was led by Sergeant Frank Alcorta, Medal of Gallantry and mention in dispatches. Frank Alcorta was a superb soldier. And here are the boys of the last patrol all lined up. Commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel Townsend there, having a word with him, and Frank Alcorta by his side. The OC of Support Company in the rear with a bottle of champagne in his hand. We were all rather relieved at this point to see signs of the end of our 12 months tour, I can tell you. Frank Alcorta. And a bit of the champagne being dished out to the onlookers. The band looking a bit deprived, I think. Major Owen O'Brien, the OC of Headquarter Company, and he was one of the guys that went out in the helicopters to resupply D Company at the Battle of Long Tan. More of the onlookers.